So you finally made it to part 3 of this 3-part animation tutorial, and we've done the modeling. In part 2 we also did the rigging and animation, and this is now finally part 3, where we're going to be finishing off by adding some materials and lights to our scene, and we're also going to be making this little heart simulation. So the file you see here is my original, but we're pretty much going to be creating the exact same thing almost in this part 3. By the way, you can check me out on social media in the description below. And if you haven't already done so, you can check me out on Patreon as well, where I will be making these assets available. So without wasting any more time, let's get into part 3, and I hope you guys enjoy. So before we can get into the simulations, we need to first of all make like a little bit of a platform for all of this to land on. So let's just get started with setting all of that up. So our floor and just our camera and stuff like that, just so we know what we're working with. So let's go Shift A, and let's just add in a plane. And with this plane active, let's go S and just scale it up about that much. And then we're gonna go S, X, and just scale it along the X. Doesn't have to be too much. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our materials. Let's just quickly give it a material. Let's just call that material floor. And make it whatever color you want. I'm just gonna go with something maybe brownish. Then we're gonna go to our right orthographic view, and if that plane is still active, we're gonna go Shift D to duplicate it, move it back, and then R to rotate. So we're just going with something like that. Okay, we can adjust it in a little while. Don't worry too much about it. It's just something like that. Go into your front orthographic view and then go Shift A and just add in a camera, and then hit 0 to go into the camera view. And you should see under your collections here, the camera should be active, and then hit G, middle mouse button, and just click it once, and then pull your mouse back and you can zoom out. Then you can just click and then go G, Z if the camera is still active, and move it up. So just put it roughly in place, and then go to your camera settings, and we're gonna make the focal length 95 because we want that nice kind of like shallow focus. And with the camera still active, we're gonna go G, middle mouse button again, and just pull back like this. So it's completely up to you to determine how you want all of this set up, right? You can make it whatever you want. But at the moment, that's what I'm going with. So now we have something for our, we have a backdrop and a floor, and we also have something that our simulation can interact with. So let's just quickly make the love hearts that are going to be simulating. So this is actually really easy, so don't get too intimidated. Let's just go, first of all, I'm just going to select these floors, and I'm just going to hit H to hide them for now. Just hit H. Let's just go Shift A and just quickly add in a cube. This is really easy. And just move it over to the side. Let's just go to our materials. Let's just give it a new material and call it hearts. And let's just, make it red in the viewport so we know what we're dealing with. And let's just tab into edit mode. And just go into wireframe if it helps. And then come over this corner, Control R, click twice to add in the yellow line. And then if that's still active, go G, Z, and move it down. Then come over this corner, Control R, double click. And with all of this active, go S, X, and scale it along the X. Hit A to select everything, then go S, Y, and scale it down onto Y. So just a super basic love heart. Then you go to your modifiers, and let's just give it a subdivision surface modifier. Tab out, and that's a simple heart. I mean, you can, if you want to be more detailed, you can select these two edges, Control B to bevel them. But don't overdo it. Just make something that's recognizable as a heart. Like, you don't want to go too overboard with any of this, right? Maybe just flatten that. So spend as much time as you want, but that's as much as I'm putting into it. Just a simple heart. And then you can come here to the modifiers, bump it up to 2, and then just go ahead and apply. Go to object mode and enable shade smooth, and now you have a simple heart. We're now going to, actually maybe I'll just modify mine just a little bit. So now we're gonna take this heart and we're gonna go S to scale it down. Something like this. And move it over the top of the character here. And once you've scaled it, it's important that you go Control A and you apply the scale. All right? We're now going to go to our physics. We're going to give this a rigid body, right? And we're going to go over to our shape, and we're going to make it mesh. And now we need to just select anything that this is going to be interacting with. For example, we need to select the head, and we need to go and give the head a rigid body. But this we want to make it passive. Okay, because it's not going to be falling, so it's going to be a passive object under the type. It's going to be animated, and we want to come to the shape, and we want to make that mesh interaction. You can also come to your sensitivity here, and under the margin, make it 0.001. So that's just going to be the gap between this mesh here and this mesh here when that physics simulation runs. So we don't want it to be floating above it and not interacting. So just make that gap margin smaller there. Make sure to set it to mesh and animate it, and that should be fine. And it's also passive. So now instead of doing that to each one of these objects here, we're just going to go ahead and select the body. Holding and shift select the arms, the legs, everything. Just select pretty much everything that's related to the body and the cat. Also the eyes, the eyelids, just holding and shift, selecting all of that. And then obviously the ears. And then holding and shift, we're going to select the head last. So that's now the active element, is the head that we gave that rigid body to. And then we're going to hit F3. And if we're just going to type in copy, and you're going to see something here called copy from active. And now all of those objects, so if I click on the ear, for example, you can see it has that passive, animated, mesh, and low margin. So now if we go to frame 1, right, and we hit the spacebar, our love heart should interact with the head here. And if it's not, okay, so in this case, I've actually found what the issue is. If you just select the head here and you go to your modifiers and there's a mirror modifier, just apply that mirror modifier. Come to the drop down and just apply it, and that should solve the issue. It's very funny because I actually had the same issue happen when I was practicing for this, and the solution was just going in and out of edit mode, and it seemed to solve the issue. So why it does it differently this time with the mirror is kind of odd to me, but that's what you have to do. So just go ahead and apply the mirror modifiers on any of those objects where it's falling through. So if you go to frame 1 and you've applied the mirror on that, now it should all fall through. So now we can go Alt-H to bring back the floor and select that love heart and just go back to frame 1. And at this point, or actually select the floor, and at this point just go to the physics and give the floor a rigid body and make it passive, and just leave it at convex hull, but just come to the margin here and enable that and make it 0.01. And now if you go into camera view, go to frame 1, hit the spacebar, this is what it should look like. So now you have interaction. Awesome. So now we can go to frame 1, select a love heart, and in your front view, go Shift D to duplicate it, S to scale it a bit, and just make a whole bunch of duplications, different sizes. It doesn't really matter. Just, you know, make it as random as possible, just to make it look like these different love hearts. Right? Some are a bit bigger than others, some are a bit smaller. Just use your own creativity and imagination. Right? So just something like that. Okay, and once you've created them, just make sure to select them all, and then go Control A and always apply to scale when we're working in physics. But right now, they should all also have the exact same physical properties because we duplicated them from one that already had the physics. So now if we go into our front view, make sure none of them are in the camera. So it's frame 1. If we now hit the spacebar, we should see all of these hearts running down. It's going to slow it down a bit, but it should all be okay. So there we have it. So now what we want to do is make sure the timing is right. So let's just drag for our animation, and we want the hearts to fall after this lever here is pushed in. So that's going to be, in this case, he does it right at 110, right? From our animation earlier, you can remember that. So at 110, I'm going to come over here to our rigid scene properties, come under the rigid body, and then we're going to go to the cache. And we want the simulation to start at 110, so 110, where that lever is pressed, and it can last for the rest of the scene. So in this case, let's just do it 220, because the keyframes, the scene frames is only 220 long. But for you, if you wanted to leave it at 250 over here and over here, you could. But for me, that's all I'm doing for this animation. So now, if we go to frame 1 and we hit the spacebar, it's just going to be the animation like normal, but that simulation won't run until frame 110. Now in this case, you can see it slows down a lot. One thing you can do, if you want, is you can just select all of these love hearts, and because we're in Blender 2.9 in this case, you can tab into edit mode at the same time with all of them selected. Hit A to select everything, and then you can just hit F3 and type here unsub and go to unsubdivide. So just type in unsubdivide, and you can unsubdivide that, tab out, and now if you go to frame 1 and you hit the spacebar and you run the animation, hopefully the simulation will be a bit quicker. And in this case, you can see it is. And if you want to, if this is too rough for you, you can just come and give these guys a subdivision surface modifier on top of all of that, right? And just set it to render only and disable it in the viewport. That stuff like that can speed things up a little bit for you. I'm not too worried about it because we're going to be seeing it better anyway once it all renders out. But that's pretty much this simulation done. Now we can actually add in some lights and get working on our materials. So let's go over to our render settings. I'm going to be working in Eevee, but let's come here and enable ambient occlusion, screen space reflections, and drop down screen space reflections and enable refraction as well. So once you've done that, we can now go Shift A, quickly add in a area light, G, Z, move it above here, and then S to scale it. And let's just go over to our light settings and let's give it a strength of 400. And now if we hit Z and we go rendered, we should see this. You can go into your camera view, G, Z, move it up a bit. And in your front view, you can duplicate this camera by going Shift D, move it over to the side a bit, Shift D, duplicate one off to the other side, and just set up these different lighting points. Go to your right orthographic view, select the main light, Shift D, bring it forward to have some lighting from the front. So just something like this should already look quite good. If it's too overpowered, just select a light and just bring the strength of it down. This is something you just have to play around with till you find something that you actually like. Okay, but this should be okay for now. What we're also going to do is we're going to add in some rim lights, which I'm going to show you how to do. So let's just go to our front view and we're going to go Shift A, and under our lights, let's just add in a point light, G, and let's just move it to the side of the head here, and we're going to scale the radius up just a bit, and then we're going to increase the strength to about, let's just say about 30 to 40. Make the radius just a bit bigger. And in your front view, you should be able to see if you move this light behind here and you increase the strength, you should start to see this nice rim lighting coming through. Okay, but you don't want it to be too intense. You just want it to kind of just be catching the rim here. And that's going to help the character stand out. So just make some nice rim lights. Once it's good, just go Shift D to duplicate it and put it all along the back of the character here. Just this nice rim light. It'll show up better once we add materials and it's no longer white. But just duplicating this rim lighting all the way around here just to make this pop from the background. And already you can see that lighting is looking really cool. So now let's go into our camera view. We now have our lighting set up. Let's get into our materials. So let's go to our shading workspace. In your camera view, hit Z and then go rendered. And let's work on all of those placeholder materials we've been creating over this little series. So let's start by selecting the head. And remember the skin 1 placeholder material we created. We're simply just going to go and make that a nice purple, like this. Bring down the roughness just a little bit. And then come to the subsurf and give it 0.1, just to give it a bit of subsurf scatter. And that's pretty much that material. Now let's go over to Materials tab, click on the ear, and make sure it's the second material, Skin 2, that's selected. And let's just make that pink, and bring down the roughness a bit. And then once again, give it a value of 0.1 in the subsurf. And that's the ears and pink parts done. Select the eye, and with the eye, we're going to make the eye material white, but fully reflective by bringing down the roughness. We're going to select the pupil, and we're going to make the pupil kind of like a really dark purple, but also fully reflective by bringing down the roughness. So just something like that. And then we're going to select the heart, make it fully red, the heart material, bring down that roughness a bit, but also come to the subsurf and make it 0.1 to give it a bit of translucency there. Just a little bit will help. And then you can select the box, and we can take the box 1 material, give it whatever color you want. I'm going to go with like an orange. And then select the box 2. I'm going to give it a bit of a reddish pink. Then we can select the gear stick. We're going to make the ball a green color. Make it a little bit reflective by bringing down the roughness. Grab the stick, and we're going to make that stick a blue kind of color. And now we're going to also just select the floor here, or the ground. And we added a material earlier. We're just going to make that kind of like a complementary brown that's a little bit darker. Just something like that, reddish brown, that kind of complements this color palette. So just something like that. You can mess around with it all you want, but don't go overboard with it. So just till it kind of matches with the purple there. So that looks really cool to me. I really like the way that looks. And what you can do now is you can also add in a tail. I forgot to add that in earlier. So that's super simple. Just simply go over into your top view. Then you can go Shift A. You can just add in a curve. Add in a Bezier. Go into wireframe if it helps, and just move the curve over, and then go to your curve properties, go to your geometry, and you're just going to come here to the depth and just increase that to make it thick. Tab into edit mode and then select a handle here, extrude it once, and then rotate it, and then go Alt S and just scale that in by going Alt S. Then select the one on the end here and then go Alt S and scale that in. Then select the one in the middle and then go Alt S and scale that up. Go to your front view and then just take this middle handle and go G, Z and move it up like that. Go to the materials, come to the drop down and give it that skin 1 material, and also give it a modifier, a subsurf modifier. We now have a super simple tail that you can just grab and place at the back here, just at the back of the cat character, and you can mess around with that as much as you want. I'm just keeping it super simple. It's not really the main focus here anyway, but just add in a super basic tail like that, and make sure to take some of those rim lights and just duplicate them and place them behind the tail there, so the tail also kind of just stands out a little bit from the background. But that looks pretty cool. I'm really happy with the way that looks. The background here, definitely I think it's maybe a bit too dark in value. I might bring it up a bit, but just mess around with it. And with some of these hearts here, feel free just to give them a subsurf modifier where they look too chunky, okay? So, but take your time with that. Just gonna share those modifiers. So yeah, there you have it. So that's pretty much how to make this little animation. I'm gonna show you how to render all of this out. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want this to be loopable and you don't want these hearts to just disappear all of a sudden, what you can do is select the hearts, simply come over here to the heart material and just bring this material node over to the side. You can go Shift A, search, and then type in mix. Get a mix shader, place it on top of here. Then you can go Shift A, search, and get a transparency. So type in trans, get a transparent. Then plug a transparent to the bottom socket. Okay, so now we can use this mix over here when we need it. But we're not going to see anything. So for example, if I drag this value all the way up to 1, you're not going to see the transparency because you actually need to go over to your materials, and under this heart material, under the settings, you need to enable screen space reflections, and you need to make this blend mode here alpha hashed, and the shadow mode you also need to make alpha hashed. Now they should be gone like that, which is pretty cool. You're going to still see the shadows there for a second, but they just disappear, so that's all good. So now what you can do is if you actually just come over here to the corner here and you see this little cross, you can just drag up, oops, it's a bit tricky. You can just kind of come here and just drag up another window, come to this little drop down tab and make this a timeline. And then you can come here to your timeline and let's just say at about frame 90. At frame 90, you want to drag this slider all the way down to 0. So it's fully red, and this principled shader here. And then hover over this factor at frame 190. And then hit I to insert a keyframe, and then drag the slider up to 220, and at 220 we're going to drag this value all the way up to 1, so it's fully just this transparent shader that's now visible, and we're going to come here hovering over it at a 220 and we're going to hit I. So now if we go to our layout, we should see the hearts are no longer there. So the hearts, let's just go over here, run the simulation, the hearts will fall down, but then they're just going to slowly fade away. And that's going to make this animation loopable for us. So let's just quickly see what that looks like. And then the whole thing runs again. You can see there's some limitations with some of this animation, like the way we've set it up, and it probably won't look as good from the side. But this is something that's just this cute little motion graphics thing that looks kind of cute, and it's more primarily to be seen from the front. So that's how you do this. Now, I really kind of did this really quickly, and maybe the lighting over here is just a little bit too intense at the front. But this is just kind of to show you guys the tutorial, okay? Right, so it takes a bit of time to tweak things, but take your time, do it yourself, and just see what you can do. Like spend more time on the lighting and the materials. But this is pretty much how I made this animation. And if you want to render this out, all you have to do is make sure to save it, first of all. But you're going to go to your output settings. You're going to go down to output and click on this little folder here. Go to your desktop wherever and just accept it. Then you go to your file format and make it an FFmpeg. And then go to your encoding, and it's over here under the container where you can make it an MP4, which is what I recommend. Obviously, you can come up here, check your dimensions if you're happy with that. Then just go and save it again. And you can go render and just render this out as an animation. And in this case, it'll go to my desktop as a final MP4. So I hope you guys enjoyed this this 3-part animation series where we did the modeling in part 1. Part 2, we did the animation and the rigging and stuff like that. And this is where we did the little simulation, some basic lights and some basic materials. This is definitely more of a beginner thing, and I didn't really go into detail on a lot of things or do it in any kind of advanced way. So hopefully you guys were able to learn something. And once again, these files will be available on my Patreon, which also really helps support the channel. So go ahead, check that out in the description below. And I'd love to see what you guys are able to make with this little animation.